2007, this neo-Western crime thriller was written, directed, produced, and edited by Ethan and Joel Cohen and based on Cormac McCarthy's 2005 novel of the same name. After premiering at the 2007 Cannes Film Festival, it would go on to be a big commercial success, making $171.6 million back on its $25 million budget, with critics praising the Coen's direction and screenplay, as well as Javier Bardem's performance.
Sure.
That performance would go on to win him not only an Academy Award and a Golden Globe, but also a British Academy Film Award as well. The film follows three main characters: Llewellyn Moss, played by Josh Brolin, a Vietnam War veteran who stumbles upon a large sum of money in the desert; Anton Chigurh, played by Javier Bardem, a hitman who is sent to recover the money; and Ed Tom Bell, played by Tommy Lee Jones, a local sheriff investigating the scene. But a movie which revolves around Mexican cartels, shootouts, drugs, hitmen, and briefcases of money wouldn't be the extraordinary film it is without a nice stack of weapons to cover. So enough of this mumbo-jumbo backstory, and let's take a look at the weapons used by the characters in the crime thriller epic, No Country for Old Men. After escaping from police custody and stealing one of their cop cars, Anton then pulls over a random civilian. After asking the man to step out of the car, we then get to see what the hell that scuba tank looking thing is he had from earlier when he was first arrested. That, my friends, is a captive bolt gun. This particular weapon seems to be quite favored by Anton's character in the movie, as he can be seen using it frequently throughout the film. A captive bolt pistol, also known as a captive bolt gun, or simply just bolt or stun gun, is a device used for the stunning of animals prior to slaughter. It operates by using a metal bolt that shoots forward using a spring or rod it fires into, strikes the animal's skull, then retracts back into the device. There are two types of bolt guns: penetrating and non-penetrating. Penetrating is meant to go through the animal's skull, whereas non-penetrating is meant to just cause blunt force trauma, rendering the animal unconscious. The bolt itself is normally powered either by gunpowder charges, electricity, or compressed air, which seems to be the kind used by Anton's character. I understand if some of you are thinking, wow, that's one rough way to kill an animal, but actually, and I'm not a farmer here, this is just from my research, when done properly and correctly, this is considered to be one of the most humane methods for stunning animals before slaughter. Again, the goal is to render them instantly unconscious so they don't feel any pain during the process. Organizations like the American Veterinary Medical Association and EU animal welfare authorities generally approve it as a humane method, again, if done correctly. That being said, issues can come about with this method, like if the operator is untrained or careless, the shot might be misplaced, causing pain instead of instant unconsciousness. Or sometimes in high-speed slaughterhouses, the fast pace can lead to error. I gotta say, before the captive bolt gun came along, around the 1920s, the methods used to slaughter animals were a lot more manual, messy, and in my opinion, a lot less humane. Some of those older methods included blunt force trauma, aka smashing them over the head with a sledgehammer or similar tool, throat slitting, which was and still is used in many traditional and religious practices, a poleaxe, which was an axe-like tool with either a hammer or a blade, and this last one, which was quite rare and really only done in small scale or desperate situations like wartime, was manual strangulation or drowning. So, as you can imagine, the process before the captive bolt gun was much more labor-intensive, less reliable, and oftentimes much more painful for the animal. Not only is this gun an interesting weapon to show in the film, but it's also one that adds serious depth to Anton's terrifying presence. For one, it's practical for his character being a skilled hitman. The bolt gun is not only extremely quiet, but it doesn't eject any bullets or leave any shell casings. And from what Sheriff Bell says later in the film, we know Anton doesn't like to leave evidence.
You telling me you shot this boy in the head and then went digging around in there with a pocket knife?
And on top of that, it has the ability to punch through locks, as we can see Anton's character do multiple times in the film. This is a bit of movie magic. In real life, a captive bolt gun typically wouldn't be able to completely break through a lock. It could certainly dent or severely damage one, but this part of the movie is more about dramatic effect than strict realism. It also adds a thick layer of psychological terror for his victims in the audience. It's an unusual weapon, one we just wouldn't expect, and this kind of makes his character much more alien and unsettling, almost like he's not playing by the usual rules of violence. And of course, the symbolism between the bolt gun itself and that of Anton's character is pretty hard to miss. If the coin toss scene told us anything about Anton, it's that he basically sees himself as the Grim Reaper, or like an agent of death. And seeing how the bolt gun is used to kill livestock, I don't think it's too far of a stretch to say that it's implying how he himself looks at other human beings, as animals marked for slaughter. Again, Anton can be seen using the captive bolt gun many times throughout the film, either to break through a lock or a human skull. The next weapon to appear in this film can be seen in the hands of Llewellyn Moss when he's out in the desert hunting for pronghorn. The rifle he can be seen using here is a Remington 700 VLS. The VLS stands for Varmint Laminated Stock. The Remington 700 is no doubt by far one of the most iconic bolt-action rifles in the world. First introduced back in 1962 by the Remington Arms Company, this rifle model appears to have largely evolved from the Remington Model 721 and 722, both of which were introduced just after World War II in 1948. Not only this, but the military sniper rifles, the M24 and the M40, which were used for decades by the US Army and US Marine Corps, are also both based on the Model 700 design. Today, both models have been largely phased out and replaced by more modern weapons like the M2010 ESR or the MK22. The 700 series most typically features a 3, 4, or 5 round internal magazine depending on the cartridge, and holy shit can this rifle be chambered for a wide variety of different calibers. That's why I'm listing them out here instead of reading them off. However, some models can include a hinged floor plate to allow for faster unloading or to be configured with a detachable box magazine. Not only can this rifle series be chambered in a plethora of different calibers, but this rifle is all around by far one of the most customizable rifles on the market, with literally dozens of aftermarket stocks, triggers, barrels, and optic mounts all widely available. This gun has also gained quite a good reputation for its accuracy. For an experienced shooter, the 700 models have been known to achieve a 1 MOA or better at 100 yards. Of course, this can come down to the type of ammo you use, as some is just more accurate than others, as well as the specific model and barrel. But just for some context, an MOA, or minute of angle, is a tiny unit of measurement that shooters can use to describe how accurate a gun is. It basically tells you how big your group of shots will spread out over distance, with 1 MOA equaling about a 1-inch circle at 100 yards. For example, say you have a flashlight pointed at a wall while standing a few feet away. The circle of light at the end is pretty small, but the farther and farther you step back, the bigger the circle of light gets. It's the same idea with MOA and bullet spread. While Llewellyn is seen using a Remington 700 VLS when hunting pronghorn, this is technically an anachronism, since the VLS variant didn't hit the market until 1995. However, the base Remington 700 platform had already been around since 1962, so visually it still feels authentic for the story's 1980 setting. Most likely, the prop department chose the VLS model because of its rugged, heavy-duty look that compared well to what Llewellyn's character actually uses in the book. And on top of that, availability and reliability probably played a role, as prop houses often select guns that are easy to equip, modify, and film with. And if you do any research on the Coen brothers, they've been known in the past to prioritize atmosphere and character feel over strict technical accuracy. And in this case, the 700 VLS helps sell Llewellyn's competence without most viewers ever noticing the subtle timeline slip. But prepare yourself if you're a person who's super strict on timeline details when it comes to the weapons, because a lot of these guns used in this film are anachronistic to the 1980 setting. Again, Llewellyn can be seen using this rifle in the beginning when he's out in the desert hunting for pronghorn, as well as when he later stumbles upon the cartel deal gone wrong, and when he finds the dead drug dealer under the tree. After Llewellyn spots an injured pit bull limping away from him, he then follows the dog's blood trail and stumbles into what appears to be a drug deal gone wrong. As he makes his way past the dead bodies, we can see a couple different rifles and submachine guns laying on the ground. As he walks past, we can clearly see at least 2 Type 56 assault rifles, the Type 56 and the Type 56-1, which can be distinguished by its foldable stock. He also appears to walk past at least 2 MAC-10 submachine guns. The Type 56 is a Chinese automatic rifle, which is a reverse-engineered version of the Soviet-designed AK-47. Not only has this rifle seen some of the most combat action of any rifle in history, but it also became one of the most widely exported and used rifles in the 20th century, and was famously used by the Viet Cong during the Vietnam War. This weapon is well known for its rugged reliability, cheap mass production, and durability in all kinds of terrain. First designed and introduced in 1956, it's still in production today. Although in much smaller numbers, it's nowhere near produced as it once was a couple of decades ago. Just to really reiterate how widely used this gun is, from its introduction in 1956 to today, it's estimated that more than 10 million of these rifles have been produced. Norinco was by far its biggest manufacturer, but it's also been produced by companies like Polytech and State Factory 66. This rifle functions using a gas-operated rotating bolt, same as the AK-47, and most typically features a 30-round magazine while chambering 7.62 by 39mm cartridges. In this scene, there appear to be 2 different variants of the Type 56 present. The original Type 56, which can be identified by its fixed butt stock, and the Type 56-1, which can be distinguished by its underfolding shoulder stock that helps to make the weapon more compact. An interesting feature of earlier models of the Type 56 was the fixed folding bayonet, but this feature would become an optional one later on. Again, another weapon we can see in this scene as Llewellyn walks past the dead drug dealers is the MAC-10. The Military Armament Corporation Model 10, or as it's most commonly known, the MAC-10, is a compact, low-back operated submachine gun/machine pistol, which was first developed by Gordon Ingram back in 1964. The reason I said submachine gun and machine pistol is because the MAC-10 really blurs the line between a machine gun and a submachine gun just based on how it's configured. The MAC-10 fires from an open bolt, and because the bolt is so light, this gun absolutely tears through ammo at a very, very fast rate of fire. It can be chambered in either 45 ACP or 9mm cartridges, with the 9mm version firing at around 1,200 to 1,500 rounds per minute, and the 45 version still cranking out an impressive 1,090 rounds per minute. One cool design feature is that the feed ramp is actually built right into the trigger guard, which back then was a relatively new idea. And to make things cheap and simple, they just reused the same magazine design from the old M3 grease gun with some minor alterations to the feed lips and mag catch placement. Most typically when firing 45, the mag capacity of this weapon is 30 rounds, whereas 9mm is a 32 round capacity. One of the biggest reasons the MAC-10 gained widespread recognition was thanks to the iconic suppressor that was designed by Mitchell Warbell III, the same man who founded the American company Psionics in the 1960s. After partnering with Gordon Ingram in 1967, they attempted to market this gun plus suppressor combo to the US military for use in the Vietnam War. The suppressor, which Warbell designed, was a two-stage suppressor that would not only help to silence the noise of the weapon, but also help to make the gun easier to control on full auto. However, it did make the gun far less compact and concealable. But this suppressor was a massive contributor to the gun's initial popularity and gave the MAC-10 its instantly recognizable look. Unfortunately for this gun, in the 1970s, the US started cracking down on suppressor exports, and because of this, a number of countries ended up canceling their orders, as the effectiveness of the MAC-10 suppressor was one of its main selling points. And unfortunately for Military Armament Corporation, this would be one of the factors that ultimately led to the company's bankruptcy later on. After walking past the dead drug dealers, Llewellyn makes his way over to one of the trucks. After opening the door, he finds another dead drug dealer with what appears to be a Star Model BM. The Star Model BM is a single-action, semi-automatic pistol produced by the Spanish firearms company Star from 1972 to 1992. Kind of like how the Colt Commander is the compact version of the full-size M1911, the Star Model BM is the compact version of the Star Model B. One cool piece of history for this gun is that American gunsmith Timothy F. LaFrance, founder of LaFrance Specialties, formerly based in San Diego, used the Star BM as the foundation for a subcompact pistol known as the Nova 6-pack, and I'm not talking about the Nova 6 from Black Ops 1. Essentially a pocket-sized version of the Star BM, the Nova 6-pack was produced exclusively by custom order in extremely limited numbers. And at one point, it even apparently held the distinction of being the smallest 9mm handgun in the world. Again, being a compact version of the Model B, the BM was mainly intended for military and police, being widely adopted by Spanish law enforcement agencies like the Guardia Civil and Policía Nacional. With a barrel length of 3.77 inches, it has an overall length of 7.25 inches, and feeds on an 8-round single-stack magazine while chambering 9mm cartridges. This weapon, like the Type 56 and MAC-10, is not fired in any scenes, and this appears to be the only time we see them in the film. Once Llewellyn walks over to the other truck and opens up the door, he finds one of the drug dealers badly injured but still alive. Laying next to the dealer appears to be an HK SP-89. This appears to be a substitute in the film, as in the book, Llewellyn actually picks up an MP5K. I actually found it a little strange they chose to go with an SP-89. I mean, MP5s are some of the most common weapons found in film, so it just seems a little weird that they would have the trouble coming across one that they could use for the film, especially since many times in film, they will actually convert SP-89s into fake MP5Ks, since the SP-89 is the semi-auto civilian version. I will say in a stylistic sense, it makes sense, but the SP-89 is actually anachronistic to the film since the gun was not first developed until 1989. Just found that to be an interesting choice and thought I would point that out. The HK SP-89 is a semi-automatic variant of the famous MP5K introduced in the late 1980s. Being a derivative of the MP5K, it shares the same frame, bolt system, and barrel, however it lacks the vertical foregrip and full auto-fire control group, making it a pistol-only platform. It also has no shoulder stock, as it's classified as a pistol. They were imported without one, and adding one to this weapon would convert it to a short-barreled rifle under the National Firearms Act, which would require a tax stamp and ATF registration. This gun could not have hit the market at a worse time, as shortly after the SP-89 was released, the Bush administration enacted an import ban through executive action, prohibiting the import of certain foreign-made semi-automatic firearms that were deemed not suitable for sporting purposes. This is why HK went on to alter the SP-89's receiver by welding blocking bars inside to prevent the installation of full auto parts, as this was one of the workarounds HK had to do to avoid being affected by the ban. Unfortunately, this wouldn't last long, as by 1994, the Clinton administration passed the federal assault weapons ban, which expanded restrictions on both imported and domestically manufactured semi-automatic firearms. As a result, HK ceased importation of the SP-89 that same year, effectively ending its availability in the US market. Even though it had a very short civilian market run, within that short window, it sold relatively well within its niche market. And most reliable sources seem to agree that around 11,000 to 13,000 units were imported into the US before the ban. Because of its limited production, restricted importation, and close ties to the MP5 lineage, the SP-89 has become a highly sought-after collector's item, often selling between $7,000 to $10,000 depending on the condition. In recent years, HK has released modern equivalents like the SP5K, which basically serves as a spiritual successor to the SP89, and offers a modernized take on the classic design. Being a semi-automatic, the SP89 is chambered for 9mm cartridges and operates using the roller-delayed blowback system. Using standard MP5 mags, it typically feeds either a 15-round or 30-round magazine. It appears Llewellyn has a 15-round mag, but he never appears to actually fire this gun in the film. After finding a shitload of heroin in the back of the truck, Llewellyn suspects one of the other drug dealers must have been able to escape, and he begins to track the trail, keeping a lookout for any place someone would stop for shade. When he later finds the last drug dealer, who appears to be sleeping under a tree, he waits a little while to see if there's any movement. Once enough time has passed, Llewellyn finally makes his way over, but realizes the man has already died from his gunshot wounds. Llewellyn then appears to take from the dealer a nickel-plated Colt government model. This can be identified by the quick glance of the rampant Colt and government model markings on the left side of the slide. There actually appears to be two government models used in this film, this one here, and then a little later we can see Sheriff Bell armed with one, but he appears to be using a Colt Series 70 combat government model. You can tell this by the black grips with the gold Colt medallions and that rounded combat-style hammer, which were signature features of the upgraded Series 70 variant Colt put out in the late 70s and early 80s. The combat government model is basically a Series 70 government model, but with factory custom upgrades aimed at defensive or duty use, which fits really well with that of Sheriff Bell's character. The Colt government model is the civilian version of the iconic M1911. First introduced to the market in 1912, just 1 year after the US Army adopted the M1911 as their standard sidearm. I know, it's a little strange of a name for a civilian model, since government model just sounds like it'd be more geared towards military or law enforcement, but this was actually just Colt's way of branding it to the commercial market. Colt branded it this way to the public for two main reasons. One reason was to capitalize on its military provenance. The original M1911 had just been adopted by the US Army in 1911, and by branding the civilian version as the government model, Colt was basically saying to potential buyers, this is the same pistol trusted by the US military. Of course, they probably could have just used the M1911 name, but this was a military designation and not a Colt trademark. The M1911 was also tied up in US government contracts, procurement documents, and military specifications. By using a different name, Colt hoped they could create a clear commercial product line that wasn't tied up in government red tape or restricted by military specs. They also believed that the name government model still had that military prestige while also sounding a little more high-end to civilian buyers. It also helped make for easier serial tracking and production management, since military 1911s, again, were built under strict contract terms, often with specific serial ranges reserved for the US government. So Colt needed a different serial number range and branding to manage commercial sales without confusing contract fulfillment. So basically, in short, Colt wanted the civilian version to feel military grade, but also wanted the freedom to market, customize, and expand without being shackled to a government designation. Being that the government model is essentially the civilian twin of the 1911, it's got the same DNA, but with a little flair and flexibility, if you will. It's a full-size, steel frame, most commonly chambered for 45 ACP, but the civilian lineup expanded far beyond that. You can find government models chambered in 9mm, 38 Super, and even some in 10mm, all built on the same proven 1911 frame. Spec-wise, you still got the 5-inch barrel, 7-round single-stack magazine, an unloaded weight of 39 ounces, the grip and thumb safety, and of course the 1911's classic slim design. Compared to military-issue 1911s, the differences are mostly cosmetic and catalog-driven. The M1911 was Parkerized, simple, and marked US property. Meanwhile, the government model came in polished stainless and blued finishes with upgraded grips and Colt roll marks. Llewellyn can be seen using the nickel government model when he takes it off the drug dealer and checks to see if it's loaded. Then again, a little later on when he goes back to the site of the drug deal gone wrong at night and ends up being spotted. After being chased down the river by a pit bull, he then can be seen using the government model to shoot and kill the dog as it lunges at him. Most notably when they first enter Llewellyn's home. We get some good shots of it holstered up, although he doesn't draw it here.
Oh, Sheriff! We just missed him!
And then again towards the end of the film, when he goes back to visit the crime scene where Llewellyn got killed, he can be seen armed with it as he walks into the hotel room and searches around. Just for some slight context, when you hear Series 70, it usually refers to Colt 1911s made between the 1970s and early 80s that have no firing pin safety and a slightly cleaner trigger, compared to the later Series 80s that added a firing pin block for extra drop safety, but changed the feel a little bit. Later on, when Anton goes with the other two men out into the desert at night to investigate Llewellyn's truck, he can be seen picking up off another dead drug dealer what appears to be a Glock 19. The Glock is a line of polymer-framed, striker-fired, short recoil-operated semi-automatic pistols designed by Gaston Glock between 1979 and 1982 and manufactured by the Austrian company, Glock. Since entering production in 1982, the Glock has become one of the most widely adopted handguns in the world. It was first selected for service by the Austrian military and police after outperforming competitors in a series of rigorous reliability and safety trials. Over the decades, Glock pistols have become the company's flagship product line, with more than 20 million units produced as of 2020. They are now standard issue or authorized sidearms in armed forces, police departments, and security agencies of at least 48 different countries. It appears the variant Anton grabs is a Glock 19. This is actually another anachronism, as Glocks weren't introduced until 1982, with the 19 being released in 1988. And again, the film's set in 1980. But it is identified as a Glock in the book. After the release and massive success of the Glock 17 in 1982, some users found they wanted a more compact version, which is why Glock released the 19 in 1988, keeping the same basic design of the 17, while just trimming down the dimensions like the grip and the barrel, giving it a shorter overall footprint. The Gen 2 Glock 19 was produced between 1988 and 1997. The most current version of the Glock 19 is the 5th generation, which was released in 2017. Being their first compact variant of the 17, the Glock 19 retained the same 9x19mm chambering and striker-fired short recoil operation, but featured a shorter 4.02-inch barrel and a standard 15-round magazine capacity. After picking up the Glock, Anton can be seen racking the slide to see if it's loaded, and then proceeds to use it to execute the men who brought him out to Llewellyn's truck, shooting one guy in the chest and the other guy in the head. A little later in the film, Sheriff Bell and Wendell follow tracks out to the scene of the drug deal gone wrong. When Wendell rides near one of the dead drug dealers, we can see another weapon which we didn't see before, and that weapon is an Uzi. The Uzi is a family of Israeli submachine guns and machine pistols originally developed in the late 1940s by Major Uziel Gal, not long after the founding of the State of Israel. It operates on an open bolt blowback system and was one of the first firearms to feature a telescoping bolt, which was a key innovation that allowed the magazine to be inserted directly into the pistol grip, resulting in a more compact and maneuverable weapon. With the prototype completed in 1950, the weapon was submitted to the Israeli army for evaluation, and it was chosen over more traditional designs due to its mechanical simplicity and low production cost. Despite Gal's request for the weapon not to be named after him, his wishes were ultimately ignored. The Uzi was officially adopted in 1951 and first issued to IDF Special Forces in 1954. By 1956, it had been placed into general service. The earliest models featured a short, fixed wooden stock, with later variants replacing the wood with a more compact folding metal stock. The Uzi served as a personal defense weapon for rear echelon troops, officers, artillery crews, and tank operators, while also being deployed as a frontline weapon for elite light infantry assault units. Even though the Uzi proved especially useful for mechanized infantry needing a compact weapon, as well as for infantry units tasked with clearing bunkers and fighting in confined spaces, its limited effective range and accuracy in automatic fire, roughly 50 meters, became a disadvantage when facing enemies equipped with longer range small arms. And while heavier support weapons could supplement firepower, they couldn't fully replace the utility of a longer range individual weapon. The open bolt design also left the gun much more vulnerable to extreme conditions of sand and dust. These limitations ultimately led to the Uzi being gradually phased out of frontline IDF service during the 1980s. It was eventually replaced by the fully automatic Micro Taver. Again, with production of this weapon beginning in 1950, it's still being produced to this day, with a massive estimated 10 million plus having been produced. The standard Uzi has a 10-inch barrel and can be chambered in either 45 ACP or 9mm cartridges, with a rate of fire of 600 rounds per minute when feeding 9mm and about 500 rounds per minute when feeding 45 ACP. The original 9mm Uzi was equipped with a 25-round box magazine. While 40 and 50-round extended magazines were tested, they proved unreliable in practice. A 32-round version was eventually developed and adopted as a standard magazine. In the 45 variants, the full-size Uzi used 16 or 22-round magazines. It doesn't appear to be used by anyone in the film. We only just see it during this shot in the movie when it's laying next to the dead drug dealer. After Sheriff Bell and Deputy Wendell check out the drug deal gone wrong, Anton's character can be seen breaking into Llewellyn's home, hoping to find any clues about his current whereabouts, even going so far as to sit on his couch with a glass of his milk and intimidate this nice old secretary.
Where does he work?
Did you not hear me?
Not long after that, Sheriff Bell and Deputy Wendell return to Llewellyn's home to investigate after finding his truck at the scene of the crime. After noticing the door's already been broken into, Deputy Wendell draws his Smith & Wesson Model 13 and they enter the home. The Smith & Wesson Model 13, also known as the Military and Police Magnum, is a .357 Magnum double-action revolver originally designed for law enforcement and military use. Built on Smith & Wesson's K-frame, is essentially a .357 Magnum adaptation of the heavy barrel version of the classic .38 Special Model 10. The Model 13 was produced from 1974 to 1999 and saw widespread use among both police departments and federal law enforcement agencies in the United States. It was originally requested by the New York State Police as a .357 Magnum replacement for their Model 10. Not only this, but the FBI also issued the Model 13, specifically the round butt grip variation with a 3-inch barrel, shortly before transitioning to semi-automatic pistols. One of the main reasons for switching to semi-automatics over revolvers is that as the decades went by and as new weapon innovations came about, the FBI and other law enforcement agencies were beginning to be outgunned more frequently by criminals with higher capacity weapons. High-profile incidents like the 1986 FBI Miami shootout helped accelerate the switch to semi-autos. It was actually the last revolver issued by the FBI and was widely considered a complete success among special agents. Its compact size, manageable recoil, and powerful chambering made it an ideal sidearm for investigative work. Again, chambered for .357 Magnum, the Model 13 is a 6-shot double-action revolver that also has the ability to shoot .38 if you so please. It's built on a medium-sized K-frame and was typically produced with either a 3-inch or 4-inch heavy barrel with fixed sights and came with a blued finish, but other versions could come nickel-plated. After Llewellyn puts Carla Jean on a bus to her mom's house to keep her out of danger, he then goes to get himself a motel room where he can hide the money while he goes out and buys himself some new boots. When he returns, he notices that he's already been found and quickly gets the cab driver to take him to a different motel. A little later, Anton can be seen driving around as he looks for the transmitter. While crossing a bridge, he pulls out a suppressed Intratec Tech 9 to kill a crow. The Intratec Tech 9, most commonly just referred to as the Tech 9, is a blowback-operated semi-automatic pistol developed by Intratec, which is an American subsidiary of the Swedish company Interdynamic AB. First introduced in 1984, unfortunately making this weapon another anachronism, the Tech 9 was built using inexpensive molded polymers and a combination of stamped and milled steel parts. Its simple construction made it easy to maintain and modify, contributing to its massive commercial success, with an estimated little more than 250,000 units sold. Interdynamic AB originally developed this gun as the MP9, a low-cost 9mm submachine gun inspired by the Carl Gustaf M45. The MP9 was originally intended for military use and was pitched to the South African apartheid government, who ultimately rejected it. Unfortunately, no one else really seemed to take an interest in the weapon either, and without a government contract, Interdynamic was stuck with the design and no buyer. But Interdynamic wasn't ready to quit on the project yet, and set up their American subsidiary company called Interdynamic USA, based in Miami, Florida, where they rebranded and modified the MP9 for the US civilian market. Since automatic weapons were, and still are, heavily regulated under US law, they originally converted it and rebranded it as the KG9, which was an open-bolt semi-automatic. However, the ATF ruled that the open-bolt KG9 was way too easy to convert to fully automatic, so they modified it once more so it could operate using a closed bolt, and they marketed this version as the KG99. It still had its aggressive SMG look, but was technically a pistol. Eventually, the company Interdynamic USA restructured in 1984 and changed the name to Intratec. The KG99 was then further refined and rebranded once again to finally become the infamous Tech 9. Unfortunately for this gun, it would quickly go on to gain quite a notorious reputation after appearing in several high-profile crimes, as well as becoming a frequent prop in movies, music videos, and media, often being portrayed as the bad guy gun. Because of this, it was specifically named in the 1994 federal assault weapons ban, which prohibited the sale of Tech 9s with certain cosmetic features like threaded barrels, high-capacity magazines, and barrel shrouds, which was basically everything that made the gun as popular as it was. Unfortunately for Intratec, the company would shut down entirely in 2001, discontinuing production of its Tech 9 line. But to this day, the gun remains infamous both as a symbol of 80s and 90s gun culture, and as one of the few firearms to directly evolve from a failed military SMG into a mass-marketed civilian pistol. The Intratec Tech 9 is chambered for 9mm cartridges, shooting from detachable box mags with capacities most commonly either 20 rounds or 32 rounds. The gun features a polymer framed with a stamped steeled upper receiver and has a distinctive barrel shroud and threaded barrel to allow for the attachment of suppressors. It has no stock and fires from a closed bolt with a simple fixed firing pin. Measuring roughly 13 inches in length, the Tech 9 was bulky for a pistol but had that aggressive look of an SMG. Winchester stopped making this shotgun back in the 50s, and today it's pretty rare to get your hands on an authentic one. So in the film, it's technically a Norinco clone of the Winchester 1897 and not the true thing, but since it's supposed to be the Winchester, we're going to go over that one. The Winchester Model 1897, often referred to as the Model 97, M97, riot gun, or trench gun, is a pump-action shotgun featuring an external hammer and a tubular magazine. Manufactured by the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, it was developed as an evolution of the Winchester Model 1893, both designed by the legendary John Browning. Produced from 1897 to 1957, over 1 million units were made. The Model 1897 was designed to be a stronger, more robust upgrade over the Model 1893, which itself was an improvement over the earlier Spencer 1882 pump-action design. While visually similar to its predecessor, the 1897 featured a thicker receiver, allowing it to safely chamber and fire smokeless powder shells, which were still relatively new at the time. As the years went on, the Model 97 became one of the most popular shotguns in the American market, setting a performance benchmark by which other shotguns were judged. One of its most distinctive features is the lack of a trigger disconnector, meaning the shooter can hold the trigger down and the shotgun will automatically fire as soon as the action is cycled and returned. This feature is known as slam firing. While the Winchester Model 1897 is often remembered for its gritty trench gun variant, it was originally intended and widely used as a field shotgun for civilian sporting purposes, and the standard field model featured longer barrel lengths, typically 26 inches, 28 inches, or 30 inches. It was marketed heavily towards hunters, ranchers, and sportsmen, and quickly earned a reputation for reliability in the field. Unlike the military version, the field model lacked the bayonet lug and heat shield, and came with a more traditional walnut stock and blued finish. The field variation played a major role in making pump-action shotguns a staple in American hunting culture. It was especially favored for upland game, waterfowl, and varmint control in the first half of the 20th century. Llewellyn can be seen cutting off the barrel and stock after buying it. Then later at the Eagle Pass Hotel, he can be seen using it to shoot at Anton multiple times, even hitting him in the leg before he can escape. Later, after Llewellyn buys the shotgun and some tent poles, he heads back to the original motel room to retrieve the money he left there. However, Anton, who's been driving around this whole time looking for him, finally picks up a beep on the receiver and pulls into the Del Rio parking lot. After finding the room with the tracking device, Anton walks up to the door of 138 barefooted, armed with his captive bolt gun, and none other than one of the coolest weapons used in this film, Anton's silenced Remington Model 1187, which he uses in this scene to do this. The Remington Model 1187 was introduced in 1987 as an upgraded successor to the long-running and highly successful Remington Model 1100, which had been around since the 1960s. While it retained the gas-operated semi-automatic action of the 1100, the 1187 introduced a key innovation, a self-compensating gas system. This allowed the shotgun to automatically adjust and reliably cycle anything from light 2 3/4 inch target loads to heavy 3-inch Magnum shells, giving shooters versatility without needing to manually tune the gun for different ammunition. It was produced in a wide range of configurations, including field models, police variants, and tactical setups, with both 12-gauge and 20-gauge options available. Although the Model 1100 remained in production alongside it for a time, the 1187 ultimately became Remington's go-to auto-loading shotgun well into the 2000s. Though eventually eclipsed by newer designs like the Versa Max and the V3, the 1187 remains well regarded for its reliability, durability, and decades-long track record both in civilian and professional use. It's worth noting that while the 1187 appears in No Country for Old Men, its inclusion is, like many of the other firearms, anachronistic, as the firearm wasn't released until 1987. Unfortunately, the silencer Anton used on this gun is not a real one, as it was custom built for the film by the props team specifically for visual and psychological impact, and not realism. At the time of production, the only known suppressed shotguns were niche setups like the Hush Puppy, which used pump-action platforms. Unfortunately, that wouldn't fit the script, which specifically called for a semi-automatic shotgun with a suppressor, a firearm that didn't exist in real life at the time. To bring it to life, prop master Keith Walters reached out to Larry Zanoff and his team at Independent Studio Services, who were tasked with designing something entirely original. The result was a custom-built silencer attached to a Remington 1187, engineered not for function but for character. The goal wasn't realism, it was storytelling. Zanoff and his crew intentionally gave the suppressor a handmade, improvised appearance, as if Shiger himself had quietly machined it together in a garage. Combined with unsettling post-production sound design, the weapon became a perfect extension of Anton's eerie persona. In this video, Larry Zanoff actually talks about the silencer, which I'll put a link to in the description if you want to check it out. He literally just says that it's a metal contraption on the end of the gun and not functional. Anton's character can be seen using it to kill the Mexicans who were in Llewellyn's room, literally almost taking one guy's arm off with it. He also uses it to kill the businessman who hired him and Carson Wells, and then he later uses it to kill Carson Wells in his hotel room. During the scene where Anton kills the Mexicans in the hotel room, firstly I want to point out that right before he blows this guy's arm almost clean off, he can be seen reaching over to the nightstand to grab a MAC-10. But once Anton goes for the guys in the bathroom, the first guy can be seen jumping out and firing at Anton with what appears to be a Cobra M11-9. After the collapse of Military Armament Corporation in the 1970s, a new company called SWD Inc., named after its founders Sylvia and Wayne Daniel, picked up the leftover Mac tooling and parts and set out to revive the Mac-style guns under their own operation. To better market these guns to civilians, they created the Cobra brand, complete with the hooded Cobra logo, giving their products a much more aggressive and recognizable identity. Their most famous product became the Cobra M11-9, a compact, blowback-operated 9mm submachine gun developed in the early 1980s. While it shares some similarities to the MAC-10, the M11-9 isn't a straight copy. It's a redesigned, budget-friendly version tuned specifically for 9mm. It features a simple blowback system, a barrel around 5 inches long, and typically feeds from a 32-round magazine. In full auto form, the M11-9 absolutely tears through ammo at a wild 1,200 rounds per minute, making it nearly impossible to control without a suppressor attached. Like the Tech 9, the M11-9 became iconic thanks to movies, music videos, and news coverage, but in real life it was known for rough ergonomics, heavy recoil, and cheap mass production. The company's success wouldn't last long. In 1986, the passage of the Hughes Amendment effectively froze civilian machine gun sales by banning new machine gun registrations, instantly killing a massive part of Cobray's business model. Around the same time, the ATF also ruled that open-bolt semi-automatic firearms were too easily converted into full auto, forcing SDW to redesign their guns with closed-bolt mechanisms that were heavier and less desirable. As if that wasn't enough, Cobray guns were getting hammered in the media, heavily associated with crime, gang violence, and the so-called bad guy image, further damaging their reputation. Suppressor export bans, destructive device reclassifications, like what happened to the street sweeper shotgun, and constant political pressure choked the company's remaining markets. And by the early 1990s, with sales dried up, a destroyed reputation, and nowhere left to pivot, SWD collapsed and the Cobray brand was sold off to smaller companies. Today, original full-auto Cobray M11-9s are rare collector pieces, sometimes worth as much as $8,000 to $10,000, while the semi-auto versions are still a common sight at gun shows. Well, that's going to do it for this one. As always, I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if I missed anything or if I got anything wrong down in the comments. If you like this kind of content, subscribe for more.